evolution of human life has taken more than 1 billion years. What distinguished this process was the development of an intelligence that allowed us to advance more quickly than the chance occurrences of evolution would allow. We did not need to grow fur to keep warm. We learned to make clothes and to build houses. We did not need to develop great speed for hunting. We learned to tame animals and to make weapons and simple tools. We learned to mine and to smelt metals, to build machinery, to mill cotton to make cloth, and in this century to produce a vast array of synthetics, rubber and plastics, fibers and dyes, radioactive substances. The roots of this explosion in technology lie in the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution several centuries ago. So do the roots of the current epidemic of workplace disease. In 1775, the unusual number of scrotal cancers in chimney sweeps was first linked to their exposure to soot on the job. 200 years later, coke oven workers in the steel industry are dying of lung cancer at a rate 5 to 10 times the national average from the same class of chemicals in coke oven emissions. From the uranium mines of Elliott Lake to the steel mills of Hamilton, the accomplishment of a newer, more efficient, and more profitable technology has been at the expense of the health and lives of untold numbers of working men and women. Approximately 1,000 Canadian workers will die this year in accidents on the job. Many times this number will die as a result of diseases caused by the work they do. The National Cancer Institute in the United States has recently estimated that 20 to 40% of all cancer is caused by substances in the workplace. In Canada, that means between 10 and 15,000 deaths each year from workplace cancer alone. It is a needless sacrifice. The same intelligence that designed the foundry to shape metal can provide it with ventilation to protect its workers. The same intelligence that organized societies has organized workers into unions which can fight to make the workplace safe. This program is about the body and how the conditions of work damage it. Keep in mind, though, that when we're looking at disease in the body, what we're really seeing is the consequences of the dusty foundry or mine, of the open vats of the chemical industry, even of the inadequately ventilated hospital lab or operating room. The cure for workplace disease lies in the workplace. Let's begin by looking at a part of the body, the skin, for example, under a microscope. We can see that it's made up of countless small structures known as cells. The cell is the basic building block of all life. The human body is made up of literally trillions of individual cells, none more than 1/1000th of an inch in size. Cells are specially designed to do things. These red blood cells carry oxygen throughout the body. The other cells you see are white blood cells, which form part of the body's defenses against infections. Nerve cells conduct electrical impulses. These liver cells contain enzymes which can detoxify poisons. Remember that it takes billions of individual cells all functioning together to form the liver seen here. Under normal circumstances, the growth of cells is under strict control, guided by a remarkable substance called DNA. DNA is found in every cell, and it acts as a kind of blueprint for the growth and specialization of each cell. But damage to the DNA results in abnormal growth. In the developing embryo, this abnormal growth produces birth defects. Damage to DNA after birth can produce a cancer, like this one in the lung, a large white malignant mass of rapidly growing tissue. Literally hundreds of workplace substances that can cause cancer have been identified. Nickel, arsenic, and cadmium all cause cancer of the lung. Benzene causes leukemia, a cancer of the white blood cells. Asbestos causes cancer in the lungs, throat, stomach, and intestines. Cancers take a long time to appear. If this asbestos worker is going to develop cancer because of his work, he will not die today, but 20 or even 30 or more years from now. This is a gas mask that was produced in Britain during the Second World War. If we look at what happened to the workers who made these masks, we find that in the 1960s and 70s, they began to die from mesothelioma, a cancer of the lining of the lung caused by asbestos. Their only exposure to asbestos was during World War II. This long latency period is typical of workplace disease. The problems of the workplace today will be the body counts of the 21st century. We've looked at the body under a microscope and seen that it's made up of cells. Now let's turn our attention to the organs that these cells form. Toxic substances in the workplace tend to cause disease in three main sites: at the site where they enter the body, the lungs, skin, and intestines, in the blood that carries them throughout the body, or in the organs that remove them from the body. By trying to expel them from the body, nature is trying to tell us something obvious, that toxic substances belong in the workplace, not the body. Let's first look at how toxic substances can enter the body. By far the most important route of entry is inhalation through the lungs. Dusts, gases, vapors, and fumes in the workplace all have ready access by this route. This roofer, for example, is breathing in the equivalent in tar fumes of smoking 700 cigarettes a day. Air reaches the lungs through a branching system of tubes, starting with the trachea or windpipe, which divides to form two bronchi, one to each lung. Each bronchus in turn branches extensively, finally ending in a cluster of tiny air sacs known as alveoli. There are about 100,000 of these air sacs in each lung. Under a microscope, we can see that each alveolus has a very thin wall. Oxygen in the air can readily pass into the small blood vessels in the wall of the alveolus. Of course, anything else in the workplace air also has ready access to the lungs. Normal lungs appear pink and spongy, like this one. Dusts such as silica cause scarring of the delicate lung tissue. This is the appearance of the lung of a victim of silicosis. Asbestos causes a similar kind of scarring. In addition, the needle-like asbestos fibers can set off the changes that produce lung cancer, such as this one seen on a chest X-ray. The asbestos fibers which caused this cancer are too small to be seen with the naked eye. These are asbestos fibers magnified several thousand times under a microscope. Only these very small particles can enter the lungs, for the lungs have evolved an elaborate system of defenses, which removes almost all particles larger than 1/5000th of an inch in size. Irritants such as welding fumes, acid mists, or truck exhausts can stimulate the lungs' defenses to produce large amounts of phlegm and the crippling condition known as chronic bronchitis. These same irritants can destroy the delicate air sacs, causing emphysema. For the victim of chronic lung disease, even walking a few yards can cause severe shortness of breath. Dust and irritants can damage the lung itself. Most dust particles are too large to pass through the walls of the alveoli, but gases, vapors, mists, and fumes can all enter the bloodstream through the lungs. Absorption through the skin is the second route of entry for toxic substances. The skin evolved to protect the internal organs of the body from the outside environment. It's tough and resistant to the forces of daily wear and tear. Under the microscope, we can see some of the other defenses of the skin. Sweat glands, which cool the body when the environment is hot. Sebaceous glands, which produce oils that repel water. A network of small blood vessels, or capillaries, which can open in hot weather and constrict in cold. Toxic substances in the workplace, particularly liquids, can be absorbed through the skin into these small blood vessels. Solvents such as trichloroethylene dissolve the protective oil barrier of the skin and pass freely into the bloodstream. This worker is suffering from dermatitis, caused in this case by the vapors of phenylformaldehyde. Dermatitis is an inflammation of the skin that can be caused by hundreds of workplace substances, including solvents, epoxy resins, acids, and caustics, and metals. This case of dermatitis resulted from exposure to chromates. Carbon black and prolonged exposure to sunlight have been linked with skin cancer. Skin cancers such as this can also be caused by arsenic and cutting oils. The third major route of entry is ingestion through the stomach and intestines. The food passes from the mouth down the esophagus and into the stomach. It's absorbed into the bloodstream from the small intestine, and the wastes are excreted from the large intestine. In this artist's representation of the intestinal cells, you can see that the cells have hundreds of small, finger-like projections. Their presence creates an enormous surface area for absorbing food, equal in size to a football field. Asbestos workers have an unusually high incidence of cancers of the stomach and intestines. Asbestos fibers that have been trapped in phlegm from the lungs reach the stomach when this phlegm is unconsciously swallowed. This is a cancer of the large intestine. The whitish yellow mass is the cancer. Above it are the normal folds of the wall of the intestines. Toxic substances may also reach the stomach if food is eaten in unhealthy work areas, or if adequate lunchroom facilities are not provided. We've seen how toxic substances in the workplace enter the body by inhalation, absorption, and ingestion. Now let's look at some of the physical injuries that workers are victim to. Every 16 seconds, a Canadian worker is injured on the job. Muscle tears and strains are common among workers involved in heavy manual labor. Back injuries are the most common and also the most difficult to treat of work-related injuries. The spine is composed of a series of bones or vertebrae with a small cushion or disc between each vertebrae. Twisting or straining injuries to the back can cause part of this disc to protrude, putting pressure on the nerves coming from the spinal cord. This is the common condition known as a slipped disc. Because the nerves supply sensation to the leg, pain is felt in the back of the leg as well as in the back. Not all back injuries result from a slipped disc. They may be caused by injuries to the muscles or the vertebrae, or by years spent working in uncomfortable postures with poorly designed machinery. Workers who must spend long periods standing on hard floors may develop low back pain. They can also develop varicose veins. The exact causes of back pain are poorly understood, and the treatment is often unsuccessful and frustrating. Sprains and fractures can occur when poorly maintained machinery leaks oil onto the workplace floor, or when spills are not promptly cleaned up. Over a long period of time, the wear and tear caused by vibration can deform the joints, producing arthritis. These same forces can also cause tendonitis, or inflammation of the tendons, and painful spasms of the blood vessels known as Raynaud's phenomenon, or more commonly, white finger. In the next part of the program, we'll look at how toxic substances are carried throughout the body and how the body's natural defenses can be damaged by the workplace. program, we looked at how toxic substances enter the body. Now we'll take a look at the circulatory system, the heart and the blood that carries them throughout the body. The center of the circulatory system is the heart, which pumps blood outwards through a network of blood vessels. These blood vessels branch like a tree, becoming smaller and smaller as they do. They branch so extensively that no cell in the body is more than several thousandths of an inch from the smallest branches or capillaries. Food and oxygen reach every cell in the body through these capillaries, but so can toxic substances from the workplace. Lead fumes, for example, inhaled through the lungs, can reach and damage the brain, the nerves, the kidneys, and the bones via the bloodstream. The red blood cells seen here contain a protein known as hemoglobin. Oxygen combines readily with hemoglobin. Unfortunately, carbon monoxide combines much more readily. Carbon monoxide is a common workplace hazard, present wherever gasoline-powered equipment is in use. In high doses, carbon monoxide kills because it overwhelms the hemoglobin in red blood cells, and the body is deprived of the oxygen it needs to survive. But even low doses of carbon monoxide can have serious effects. A recent study of garbage collectors in New York City found that they have twice as many heart attacks as men in the same age in the general population, probably as a result of their exposure to carbon monoxide from truck exhausts and polluted city air. The heart is the most active muscle in the body and consequently needs a tremendous amount of oxygen. All of this oxygen is carried by the blood passing through 3 small blood vessels known as the coronary arteries. In some way that's not at all understood, chronic exposure to carbon monoxide causes narrowing of these arteries and eventually a complete block or a heart attack. The muscle beyond the blockage dies and is replaced with scar tissue. Blood cells are formed in the marrow cavity inside the bones. Substances such as lead and benzene can interfere with the formation of new blood cells, causing anemia, a lack of red blood cells. Benzene can affect these blood-forming cells in another way. An increased incidence of leukemia is seen in workers exposed to benzene. Leukemia, shown here, is a cancer of the white blood cells. Exposure to radiation or to styrene butadiene in the rubber industry has also been linked with leukemia. Now let's look at the way the body protects itself and the routes by which toxic substances leave the body. These organs are highly vulnerable to workplace hazards. The main protections are the skin, which we've already discussed, and the liver. The liver transforms toxic substances so that they can be excreted by the kidneys and bladder. The liver evolved as the chemical factory of the body. Liver cells contain enzymes which can convert certain toxic substances into new chemicals, which are then more readily handled by the kidneys. But in that process, the liver itself may be damaged. This is the appearance of the liver of a victim of cirrhosis. The damaged liver is healed by the formation of a scar, just as occurs in the skin when it's cut, or in the lungs when they're damaged by dusts, or in the heart after a heart attack. Liver damage is most commonly associated with alcohol, but there are literally hundreds of workplace substances which can cause it. Metals such as bismuth and cadmium, solvents such as carbon tetrachloride and perchloroethylene, chemical intermediates such as benzene and styrene. The liver's defenses can also backfire. Certain dyes are converted by the liver from less harmful forms into substances which can cause cancer. Vinyl chloride, an intermediate in the production of plastic, has been linked with an otherwise rare and invariably fatal form of liver cancer known as angiosarcoma. There's recent evidence that other substances, notably arsenic, may also cause this cancer. The kidneys evolved to control the balance of water and salts in the body and to remove wastes from the bloodstream. Under the microscope, they're seen to be made up of hundreds of thousands of filtering units, which filter the blood passing through and remove what's not needed by the body. Just as the lungs are vulnerable to toxic substances because they're the major route of entry, the kidneys and bladder are commonly damaged because they are the major route of exit for toxic substances. Metals such as mercury, arsenic, and lead, solvents such as carbon tetrachloride, even gasoline vapors and turpentine have all been found to cause kidney disease. Urine from the kidneys is stored in the bladder. Various dyes and intermediates in the chemical industry have been linked with cancer of the bladder. Coke oven emissions cause cancer of the kidney. So far, we've only considered how workplace disease affects the worker, but the problem does not stop there. Let's look now at the effects that substances in the workplace can have on future generations. The reproductive system, the testes of men and the ovaries of women, produce the cells which will eventually give birth to our children. Any damage to these cells can have disastrous consequences, as the experience with thalidomide showed. Deformities in the children may result, or the developing embryo may be so severely damaged that it's unable to survive at all and is miscarried. Nurses in operating rooms have twice as many miscarriages as other women because of their exposure to anesthetic gases. Chemicals which cause miscarriages or birth defects do so because they damage the genetic material of the cell, the complex chemical called DNA. Damage to DNA is also involved in cancer, and so substances which cause cancer often cause birth defects or miscarriages as well. An increased incidence of birth defects has been detected in the community around a vinyl chloride plant in Shawinigan, Quebec. The problems of the workplace do not stop at the plant gate. Let's review some of the principles of the body and workplace hazards that have been discussed in this program. All life is composed of cells. Substances in the workplace can damage these cells, causing disease. Toxic substances enter the body by one of three main routes: inhalation through the lungs, absorption through the skin, ingestion through the stomach and intestines. Once in the body, these substances are carried to every cell by the circulatory system. The liver is commonly damaged because it's part of the body's protection against poisons. The kidneys and bladder are damaged because they're the major route of exit. At this point, we'll introduce one more concept. The kind of damage that is done by toxic substances may be acute or chronic. This dermatitis caused by alkali is an example of an acute disease. The acute effects of toxic substances occur immediately or very soon after exposure and generally require high levels of exposure. They're sudden and dramatic. They may be fatal, but often they're treatable. They result from a direct action of the substance on the cells of the body. Much more serious, however, are the chronic effects of toxic substances, such as this lung damage resulting from silica dust. Chronic effects become apparent only after many years. They come on insidiously, often decades after the worker's first exposure. By and large, they are not treatable, and they occur as a result of the body's own defenses. The only cure for these diseases lies in treating the workplace. So far, we've concentrated on the effects that individual substances have on individual organs in the body. This is a necessary but misleading oversimplification. Workers on the job are exposed to not one, but dozens, hundreds, even thousands of different hazards, and the combined effects of these are often much greater than the simple sum of their parts. Trichloroethylene, for example, increases the body's susceptibility to noise in the workplace. Fully 40% of Canadian men ultimately die of heart attacks, 4 times as many as at the turn of the century. Numerous factors have been implicated in this incredible epidemic: smoking, obesity, high blood pressure, lack of exercise. Though it's known that common workplace hazards such as stress, noise, and carbon monoxide all increase a person's risk of having a heart attack, the role of working conditions simply has not been adequately studied. Contrary to popular belief, heart attacks are more common in workers than executives. Groups of workers as diverse as garbage collectors, steel workers, rayon viscose workers, and munition workers all have more heart disease than men in the general population. The different organs of the body function together as a whole and can't be considered in isolation one from the other. The effects of severe liver disease, for example, are seen in virtually every other organ. The liver is no longer able to detoxify poisons. These build up in the blood and affect the brain, causing confusion, even coma. They can damage the kidneys, impairing their ability to excrete water and causing a tremendous buildup of fluid. This extra fluid creates a great burden for the heart, and the heart begins to fail, causing the lungs to fill with fluid. The kidneys react to the failing heart by retaining water, compounding the already huge excess of fluid in the body. The added fluid in the lungs deprives the brain of oxygen, adding to the effects caused by the buildup of toxic substances. And so on, so that a person with terminal liver disease ultimately dies of total body failure. Carbon tetrachloride, a solvent, can produce this tragic and sometimes fatal chain of events. But exposure to carbon tetrachloride in the workplace can be completely eliminated by replacing it with a less toxic solvent or by the use of local ventilation. The purpose of this program is not to overwhelm you with the medical complexities of workplace disease, for the real problem is in the workplace, not in the body. The human damage we've discussed in this program is frightening. It's also preventable. It is the result of working conditions we have the power to change. Our health is the health of the construction site, the office, the factory, and the mill. It's here that our battle begins.